Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are live here today, September 29th at almost 5:45. We're starting a little early, which is fine because it can give us time to do our introductions. My name is Érica. Like I said, I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Community Empowerment Coordinator at the Pride Center. And I am here today with our special guest for our virtual book reading of Girl Squad, author Kim Hoover. And I'm going to let her take the mic now to introduce herself.
Well, first of all, thank you, Érica, and thank you to the Pride Center San Antonio, and also to Twig Bookstore, who procured the books, Girl Squad, several copies of Girl Squad that I'm going to stop by the bookstore tomorrow to sign. So those are available for free for the first 20 people who show up to claim one. So keep that in mind. And yes, my name is Kim Hoover. I was born here in Texas. I was born in Fort Worth and grew up mainly around Amarillo, a town called Pampa. And I went to Baylor University, and then I went on to Duke Law School and ended up in Washington, D.C. from there, where I practiced law for a long time, and also got into workforce housing, so I own a real estate company, and eventually turned back to a lifelong passion, which is writing books, and Girl Squad is my first published book. So I'm very excited to be here with you to talk about it and with your audience.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here and sharing this this book with us. We're really excited to hear you read from it and to learn more of the creation and your process around the book. So if you feel free, if you want to let us know what part of the book or chapter you're going to read to us and give us a teeny bit of context for those who may have not maybe had a chance to peek into the book.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me set the context for this. This chapter is, it's about halfway through the book. The story features three young girls, two of whom are 15, they're lifelong best friends, Cal, who's the narrator, and Rachel, who's her best friend, who lives across the street. And then they're also friends with a girl named Jane, who's new to town, sort of more sophisticated, a little more worldly, and she, importantly, has a driver's license, which is important as the girls go through their adventure, which involves trying to figure out what happened to Cal's mother. She went missing, and at this point in the book, they've figured out that she is somehow involved with a group of criminals who are up to something nefarious. They don't really know exactly what it is, but they know it has something to do with petroleum, and they have gone into the Paladura Canyon to try to spy on this gang, and in the process took a lot of photographs, and then had a near miss and almost got caught, but were able to escape the canyon and then get down to Cal's grandmother's farm, which is in Sweetwater, Texas. So as this chapter opens, that's where they are. They're at the grandmother's house. And by the way, the mother's name is Joyce, which comes up in this chapter. So we have Cal, the narrator, Rachel, her best friend, Jane, the third girl, and Joyce, who's the mother. We played poker and hearts and authors while we waited for Grandma to get back with the developed photos. As soon as she walked through the door, we grabbed the package and laid them out on the kitchen table. A lot of them were blurry or too dark to make out the images, but one caught my eye. Is there a magnifying glass? Here you go, Grandma said, taking one out of the kitchen drawer. I held the magnifying glass up to the photo, looking at it carefully. At first, I thought I was seeing things, but I wasn't. I couldn't help it. I buried my head between my knees and let out an ugly scream. What is it? Rachel grabbed the glass and looked for herself. Oh my God, it's Joyce, she said. She was driving that RV. No, Grandma cried. I felt like someone had punched me. Jane looked at the photo like she didn't believe it. It doesn't mean she's working with them voluntarily, Jane said, kneeling next to me. Don't jump to any conclusions. This is just one piece of information. What now then? I asked. We sat there, stunned and quiet for several seconds until I couldn't stand it any longer. I need to get out of here for a while, clear my head. Do you mind if I come? Jane asked. You can show me around. Take your mind off this for a while. Sure, I said, I'd love to. Rachel looked at me and I knew what she was thinking. She had figured out that I had a crush on Jane. I had been waiting for her to confront me, but she was holding back for some reason. Sooner or later, though, she would do a come to Jesus with me. I knew it. I looked away and walked out the side screen door. Jane followed. We walked past the barn and across a pasture. The grass was spotty and the rocky terrain made for slow going. They'd had a drought here for most of the year. Tumbleweeds blew by, piling up against fences of scrawny mesquite trees. I loved this place. The simplicity of it was its own form of beauty. I always felt calm here, peaceful and protected. We walked for a long time without saying anything. We got to the creek. A thin stream of water barely covered the rocks across the bottom. They were slick, polished by decades of exposure. Jane slipped on one and stumbled toward the opposite bank, but I caught her arm and kept her from hitting the ground. Good catch, she said, breaking the silence. You think you know someone, I said, and then they do something completely out of nowhere and you realize you don't know them at all. Jane nodded, and a nearby cow surprised us with a long, low moo, as if agreeing with me. We both laughed. No matter what, Jane said, she's your mother. We walked across the dusty landscape as the wind picked up and blew red dirt into our faces. The tank's over there, I said, pointing to the north. We can wash off. We approached a small body of water, a pond in the ground. Why do they call it a tank? Jane asked. Because it's man-made. They usually block off a stream, so the water pools. They make it so it traps rainwater too. We knelt and splashed water on our faces and necks. I took off my overshirt and handed it to Jane while my camisole clung to my skin. Sorry, there's no towels. Just use this, I said. I felt Jane's eyes lingering on my bare shoulders as she used the shirt to dry her face and neck. Here, she said, holding the shirt out so I could put my arms through the sleeves. I let her put the shirt back on me. Then she slowly buttoned the shirt from behind, her arms around me. She pulled my hair to one side and breathed deeply at the nape of my neck. I tingled everywhere. I leaned back against her as she buttoned the last button. She hugged me tightly and then let me go. Thank you, I said, turning to look at her. You're very welcome. I guess we should get back, I said, but I didn't move. I wanted her to say no. I wanted more of whatever just happened. I wanted it, but I couldn't ask for it. It's dinner time, she said. Right, I said.
Thank you so much for giving us a small peek into Cal's world as she explores. There seems like there's so much going on in her life between her relationship with her mom and her bonding with her friends, and of course the budding relationship with Jane. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this certain passage or why you chose it before we get to the Q&A?
Sure. I think this provides a good glimpse. You know, it's kind of hard to pick a clip out of a book and have it be meaningful to folks. But I think this kind of gives a glimpse into, as you said, the situation that they're in, the kind of intrigue that's going on. They're trying to figure something out that's that's really affecting Cal's life. And at the same time, we kind of get a glimpse into the relationship between Rachel and Cal, in that, Cal believes that Rachel has already figured out that there's something going on in Cal's world that she's not being completely honest with her best friend about. And then, just the beginnings of a physical connection between Jane and Cal. So it's kind of a good short way to kind of get some insight into everything that's going on in the book, really, over the course of the whole story.
Absolutely. I like it because it just gives, like I said, just that tiny tidbit of something I think most of us can relate to when we're figuring out things. We're in a stressful situation and there's a lot of emotions coming up, right? And so those emotions get all sort of blended together, and it's hard to like piece out every single one. So yeah, thank you for reading. I'm gonna switch over to the questions now that I have. So yeah, this is the Q&A portion. Now, Kim, you shared with us that you've had many different hats that you've worn before this, from being an attorney to being involved in real estate. And what made you want to, like, at this point in your life, turn to say, I'm gonna be an author?
Well, I feel like I've been writing ever since I could put a pen to paper, really, ever since I was a child. When I was a little kid, I had a superhero that I used to write tiny little books about. His name was Super Seymour, and he was an ant, and he was always rescuing people from dire situations. And my friend best friend across the street was pretty good at drawing, and so she drew the little characters, and we had a little bit of a collaboration there. And then I was an English major in college, was always interested in writing, maybe in journalism, ended up going to law school, but I was always trying to write and trying to find time to write. But it wasn't really until my kids were older and in college that I started to have a little bit more time to devote to this. And but I worked on Girl Squad for off and on for about 5 years before I got it to the point that I thought it was ready to go to a publisher. So it's a passion and something that I enjoy a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, I think writing is a very therapeutic way to share stories. I have a huge collection of my diaries from when I was younger, and I cleaned out moving into my home and was like, wow, I was quite the little writer back then.
Good for you.
Yeah, don't do so much writing anymore. But I think that it's important for us all to understand that we have a voice inside of us, and that we just need some time to put things together to make a story. And I'm a really big fan of zines. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're like these short, kind of very homemade grassroots ways of getting out information or sharing stories. So I'm really always inspired to tell everyone, like, you don't have to write a full book or a chapter. You can write a zine and illustrate it as you wish. So that's something I really let everybody know of every age to do always. Second question is, so Girl Squad, the book, features Cal, right, our main character, growing up in this small sort of, I would probably say, you describe conservative Bible Belt Texas, right, in the 1970s, right, the certain very generation of that time. And it's after her parents getting a divorce. So there's definitely some similarities there to how you grew up. Can you tell us a little bit about getting inspiration from your life and how you and Cal are similar and different?
Sure. Well, I definitely started writing this book with the idea that I wanted to record some of my memories of growing up in the 70s in Texas. And so certainly the one thing I have in common with Cal is, yes, my parents were divorced, and that was a difficult thing at that time. Not that it's not now, but in the 70s, I didn't have any peers who were in families, divorced families. So that's something I share in common with Cal. And like Cal, my best friend lived across the street. I referred to her a minute ago with the collaboration on the Super Seymour books. But most of the other experiences that Cal has, including a romantic relationship with another girl, are things that never happened to me, and that, and especially the sort of intrigue and the chasing down a mysterious disappearance and that kind of thing. Completely just a story, a way to carry along the relationship of these three girls. But the scene, the settings, the terrain, the towns, the road trips, the football games, all of that is, right out of my experiences as a young teenager growing up in the panhandle of Texas.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting, that mix and blend of what we take, the bits and pieces of our life and lived experiences, and use them as inspiration to bring to life characters and situations that we can only dream up in our imagination.
That's right. And I totally agree with you about going back to the zines idea and just short writing. Writing is so powerful, and it's such a great way to express yourself and sort of explore your feelings, explore your values, your beliefs. So I encourage everyone to write in whatever way and to whatever length fits for them, but to use it as a tool.
Absolutely. Yes. Writing as resistance. Girl Squad is a young adult mystery novel featuring romance between two young girls. Did you always imagine you would venture into the young adult section?
I really didn't. I'm not sure that I actually knew there was a young adult category in publishing when I started this. I know that it's a very successful category, the young adult category. It's one of the stronger selling types of books that are out there. I really was just trying to tell this story, and because I left the Panhandle when I went to college, my memories are really kind of in that teenage period. And that's where I was drawing my inspiration. And so I love the young adult category, and friends of mine who love this book and who love these characters have encouraged me to come up with another story that includes these same three girls. So I'm working on that in my head. And so that would be another YA book that I might be able to put out there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that there's often a relationship between writing maybe young adults and healing an inner child or teenager, or finding that sort of way of expressing things that maybe the story of our lives didn't turn out right. Maybe a romance that didn't turn out when we were younger because maybe we didn't have the ability to explore it because of the decade, generation, what was happening at the time. So it's like a very therapeutic way to make that ending, or maybe make that situation develop in a way that we hoped.
Right. You can live it out on paper.
Yeah, it's a great way to give life to situations that we maybe missed out on as young queers. Do you think you'll continue? So you said you'll continue writing young adult. What other genres are you interested in? And what can we expect next from you in terms of writing?
Well, I just turned into my publisher, my most recent effort, which is not young adult. It's contemporary romance, I guess you would call it. And it's a story that takes place. The story is told in alternating chapters 20 years apart. Two women who meet each other when they're in their 20s and have a very closeted relationship. Neither of them had a relationship with a woman before, and it ends very badly. And one of them goes on to live as a lesbian, and the other one goes on to live as a straight person. And 20 years later, they come back into contact with you. They're sort of forced back into contact with each other. And this, raises all kinds of emotions and feelings and challenges. And as I said, the story, it unfolds back and forth between the past and the present. And my early readers have told me that it does a very good job of not telling the ending, in either the past or the present endings. So I think I'm encouraged by that, because as a writer, you don't want people to figure out the story before you've really finished telling it. So I'm excited about that. Not exactly sure when that will come out, whether it will be this year or in the spring.
Awesome. Sounds like some more good stuff to look forward to. And along those lines, right? So you're writing LGBTQ, right? This is kind of where you're writing from in terms of like your focus. And I know one of your passions is progressive politics. So how does your view of the world through that lens impact your writing?
It definitely does. I mean, I think that one of my motivations in writing books is to deal with the homophobia that we still have in our society, discrimination, and the challenges that people have when they want to just live as who they are. So it's part of my motivation for writing these books, and definitely affects me and affects the kinds of plots that I think about and the characters that I think about, the types of things the characters are, how they're spending their lives, and it will continue to impact the stories that I want to tell in the future, for sure.
Awesome. And along those lines, like you're saying, yes, and it's very timely. We not only are handling and dealing with as queer LGBTQ plus folks, but transphobia, right? And I think that there's been a huge shift in the LGBTQ movement to center trans folks and be better allies and supporters. For example, the latest anti-LGBTQ youth discrimination in sports is a huge piece of legislature that's up right now. And we're seeing, right, so a lot of the impacts that youth are having on how they're able to live their lives and be supported and be empowered. So when it comes to, being you identifying as a cis lesbian, where do you see yourself in aspects of that allyship, or in aspects of like that centering and seeing the way the movement shifted right now to like 2000 and 2021?
Well, I've seen a lot over the course of my lifetime in terms of the movement for equality in general, and I've been involved in queer politics pretty much since the day I came out. I was involved in politics before I came out, and have been involved in queer politics for 25 years or so. And it's at the same time, it's gratifying and at the same time horrifying to see where we are. I mean, we've come a very long way, but we are still, we still live with too much division, people trying to divide us all up and, treat us differently based on whatever characteristics they think we have or don't have. And I very much want to use my writing to the mantra of my writing is always be true to yourself. And that's the story I'm trying to tell with Girl Squad, and the story that I'm trying to tell with the new book. And that's the world that we need to create, where people, whoever they are free to be true to themselves. And we have a lot of work to do, and we will do it.
Absolutely. Yes, I firmly believe in allyships so that we can make sure that the world is a safe place for people to be their true expressed selves. I think that that's something I'm looking forward to, and seeing a shift from, I know that being a millennial, I would say I'm a millennial, 32, queer, trans, non-binary person, it's very important, I believe, for there to be these sort of generational conversations happening, right? Because you're of a different generation than I am, and I'm of a different generation than maybe some of the young readers reading your book. And so there's, I think, so much we always have to catch up on, so much we have to, I believe, saying recenter in our world, because like I said, things are different for my generation, like they're different for your generation. And so I really appreciate it when we're able to have these conversations across generations. And I'm so thankful for you to be here and talk about your book today.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you mentioned the intergenerational idea. I agree with you completely. And honestly, my main motivation with this particular book tour has been to get this book into the hands of more young people. And, in talking, you and I talking about, what is the world we live in today, it's quite difficult to get a book like this into the public library or into a middle school library. And I've managed to do it in a few places, but you wouldn't think it would be that difficult today, but it's not a given. And I think that says a lot about where we still are. So I'm hoping that, to the extent that anyone who's listening has any ability to get books into libraries, that they might think about helping to get this one into the library so it can get into the hands of more people.
Absolutely, yes. More LGBTQ plus representation in all aspects, and definitely would love, as a queer person of color, to always, like I said, center Black and Indigenous people of color in all of those representations. I think that's definitely one of our crucial principles at the Pride Center, and so much looking forward to hearing more from you, Kimberly, and what you're writing and what's going on. Thank you so much for being here. I know that Texas is one of your homes, so
that's right. It's my first home, so
awesome. Well, we're thankful for you, and yeah, we'll
thank
have this
you.
pick up, and everyone will know where they can find your book.
Sure, you can get it at any independent bookstore. Any bookstore, in fact, can order the book. I like to work with independent bookstores. You can also, of course, go to Amazon. So it's widely available.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll check the live. Like I said, this is my first live in a hot minute, so I think we're good. I think we're set.
All right. Thank you, Érica. It's very nice meeting you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.